Hello, it's Tim here from My Life Tonic, and welcome to this fifth of our Lunch and Learn sessions that is coinciding with the Mental Health Awareness Week, with the theme that is focusing on the importance of community. Now, over the last 4 days, the Lunch and Learn sessions have covered off a range of different areas, both that are relevant within our own personal and private lives, but also in the workplace. And I think ultimately the key message is that having a sense of community is hugely important in terms of either maintaining our mental health or also helping to help recover a sense of mental health. So, as members of any community, and again, whether that's at work, in your place where you live, or hobbies, interest groups, it can be our responsibility, one, to support and be aware of those that have mental health challenges. Hopefully, we're then tooled and ready to support in the most appropriate and relevant ways. But also, we're not there to fix the problem. So, when we are supporting an individual, the key thing is that we, a bit like a first aider, we address the initial issue, we listen sensitively without judgment to that individual's challenges, but then we direct them to the experts, the professionals that can help. And those professionals can be local GPs, charities such as Mind or Samaritans. But ultimately, it's about being there for the long term and supporting that individual without having or feeling the need to fix it. So, through the over the last week, we've looked at why community is important. I'll just recap in or on some of those areas, both to prevent a decline in mental health, but also to support and strengthen our own sense of resilience. Being mental health aware, I think, is so important so that we are able to identify traits, behaviors that may signal the fact that people around us, loved ones, friends, colleagues, may be struggling, but also to take a moment to reflect on whether, in fact, those are behaviors that you may see yourself doing. And so there's that self-awareness to start identifying if in fact, mental health can be an issue that you're struggling with. I'll go through some of the stats that will suggest that mental health issues, challenges are more prevalent than we think. And the initiative of having Mental Health Awareness Week is really to raise awareness of the size and the scope of mental health issues within the UK, but then also to, as I said earlier, tool up to help us take the corrective and the most appropriate actions. Looking then towards the community at work, after all, we spend so much time, up to a third of our working week at work, how can we then make sure that we're fostering a safe and trusting environment? And there are benefits there for the individual, obviously, but then also the organization. And one of those ways within any community environment is to think about micro moments, how we can support each other, generate a greater sense of connectivity and trust. And then we'll have some final thoughts and maybe some actions to be aware of so that over the next 11 or so months that we can actually start implementing or be aware of ways that we can support each other. And then at the end, we're launching a scoring app that will give people the opportunity to get some insights into their own well-being. Once you have those insights, we've quantified those insights so that maybe you can take those corrective actions. And it's really not with a sense of judgment. Wherever your level is, we can always make improvements. We can always look to feel better, feel more resilient, and make those improvements for our mental health. So there's not a sense of judgment. It's not a competition. It's just acknowledging that we can make improvements to ultimately make sure and ensure that we feel better either about ourselves, we have a positive mental health, and then we can enjoy our day-to-day routines with that little bit more extra enthusiasm. Okay, so why is community important? This was one of the images that I threw out and shared with you on day one. If we were to ultimately say the majority of us sometimes find it hard to do things by ourselves, and sometimes it can feel a pretty lonely place. Now, this is an example of me running either late at night, early in the morning, wanting to get my exercise in, and it's just really not that easy, but it takes a lot of dedication to do that. And there have been times when I haven't wanted to go out running in that dark. So by having that sense of community, it can help give us that little bit more motivation. It can give us that encouragement, because ultimately getting out and doing that thing, whatever it may be, certainly has a positive and lasting effect. But ultimately, the point of this image is that if we feel as if we're doing things by ourselves, it can feel, one, harder, and two, it can be a pretty lonely existence. And that leads me really to identify just the scale of the issue of mental health. It is a lot more prevalent. And I say it, people having challenges with their mental health is maybe a lot more prevalent than perhaps we would be aware of. So, to the fact that 1 in 4 adults in the UK experience some form of mental health challenge or issue. What's also potentially alarming is the fact that the age group of 16 to 24 is 1 in 5. And now, if we think about how these trends may continue and how that will impact our future generations, possibly one of the biggest challenges is to make sure that the message is being shared so that we can give each and every one of us, whatever age, whatever demographic or gender we are, that we feel able to address and support our own mental health. It's also been said that the 16 to 24-year-old age group also over-index, in fact, are the highest indexing in terms of their sense of loneliness, not having people to talk to, which may feel slightly contrary, bearing in mind the high usage of social media and the connectivity that in some ways we would think that would give and support. And that sense of community can translate into what does it mean in terms of face-to-face contact, the importance of actually having human interactions. Now, there is a place for digital communities, and they certainly can provide the support we need, but particularly within where we live or even our workplace, hopefully we're able to get that face-to-face contact as much as possible, despite there being challenges, maybe if we're working remotely or we are hybrid working. 7.8% of adults in the UK have said that they feel lonely most of or a lot of the time. And this is where I really want to bring into the fore the importance of the sense of belonging. Belonging to a community so that you have people to share experience with, to share any problems that you may be having. Now, I've given you some of the stats about mental health and the scale within the UK. Might be a good time just to give that top line summary of the range of different mental health issues that people may be struggling with. So really to list, firstly, we have the stress and anxiety, people feeling that within the workplace. If that is extended over a long period of time, that can then start to show symptoms of depression. Self-harming, eating disorders are also forms of mental health that we need to be aware of and sensitive to, as is OCD and panic attacks. So although we're obviously talking about Mental Health Awareness Week and how community can help address some of the challenges of people experiencing mental health, we've also got to be mindful that we can't just include mental health as a catch-all for one and everything. There are loads of different little variations that when we understand the different forms that they can take, there may also always be different ways that we can help support and guide those individuals. So going back to the image of a lonely runner in the dark with one light, is things are easier with a sense of community. But we've also got to make sure that you're in the community that allows you to feel comfortable, safe, and supported. And that's really where I want to emphasize community is ultimately where individuals have that sense of belonging. It's an image that is used, whether it's a jigsaw piece or just putting lots of different items together, that they fit in a coherent way. So the image here is that of a 3D puzzle. You'll see different shapes, different sizes, different colors. Ultimately, within a community, those shapes, sizes, and colors, they can represent who we are. And we should be able to feel safe in that environment. We should be valued, our voice should be heard. And we should feel comfortable being who we want to be without judgment. It may be that it's only when we find that real sense of community that we get to really experience that. And that could be within your faith group, your work, where you live. But ultimately, feeling safe and feeling comfortable gives you that sense of belonging. It also gives you a sense of interaction with other people. And if we are regularly taking part or being active within that community, more often than not, we'll have the same values, we'll share the same cultures. However, that's also not to say that we shouldn't celebrate differences can also coexist within that community. So, for example, if we enjoy running, and I've probably used this analogy before, if we're in a running community, that will bring together people from all sorts of different backgrounds within your local geographical area. You have a common interest, and that can be a way for us to find a new community, expose ourselves to new people that we wouldn't otherwise come across. And that in itself can be a positive experience. So being mental health aware, so we spend over a third of our days at work. So being mental health aware is another important aspect. And it's really about understanding or noticing what are some of the signposts that may allude to the fact that someone may be struggling with their mental health. And there are, in my mind, probably 5 key areas to be aware of. Firstly, the communication that you have between that individual. A previously vibrant, lively individual may start to change to being maybe more quiet, more subdued, maybe slightly more erratic in the fact that they might react in slightly different ways. Their productivity may be going down in the fact that they may be missing deadlines, or they're not responding as quickly as they previously did. Procrastination and a lack of concentration can also be indicators that someone is not quite managing or on top of their own mental health. Secondly, we've got the routine and productivity. So that sort of almost alludes to some of that communication issue. But if you start to notice someone is maybe coming to work later, they are not delivering the things that they used to do, then again, that might be just a first initial tip. Now, it's not to say that we should overreact quickly and start raising the alarm bells. Ultimately, give yourself some time, notice, and start to just track and monitor the individual in a supportive kind of way. And as and when, or if you feel you need to have that conversation, do it in a discreet, private way and give that person the opportunity to share how they are feeling. There are 3 other areas that may be signposts to someone's mental health taking a turn. And that was firstly their energy levels and their appearance. It may be that they are taking less care of themselves, maybe through their diet, through their exercise, through their physical appearance, what they're actually wearing. And that sense of lower self-esteem, self-talk that is more negative than you'd normally expect or experience can also be some of those indicators. In terms of that negative self-talk, someone can potentially be more emotionally less in control. Maybe their reactions are heightened. They may feel more teary in certain environments. And this isn't just purely in the work environment, it can be across the board in whichever community that you're in. And behavior is the last of the areas that may be an indicator that someone is struggling. In that, they may be overindulging in certain activities, in substances that they haven't previously done. And they might also be taking more risks than they have done previously. So just to quickly summarize, 5 signposts that someone may be struggling with their mental health is that their communication changes, their routine and productivity reduce, their appearance and energy also can decline. They may be more emotional than they have been previously. And then lastly, their behavior can start to change. As I said right at the start, as and when, or if you feel you need to have that conversation in private. Do it sensitively and discreetly. You're not there to fix the problem. You are there to help support the individuals. And that may be the starting point where someone can start to articulate how they're feeling and what is potentially the cause of those feelings. So yesterday on day 4, I talked about micro moments and how small gestures can make the difference to the way somebody feels. Now, if you can see the image, you may think that a postcard from the Isle of Wight is slightly random. Well, I'll very briefly go into it again. So I coach a local rugby team, my son's rugby team. We've recently been on tour, and the parents of the kids that we coach got together and wrote little cards for each of the coaches just to say thanks for the time, the commitment that we have shown. But in the spirit of a micro moment, actually means that this feel-good factor is shared 3 times. Firstly, at the point of receiving the card. The second is when I take the card home and I share it with my family. I relive that feel-good factor. And then thirdly, keeping it in a prominent place reminds me of the positive experience that I've had in coaching. Now, that doesn't mean to say we all need to go out and start buying lots of postcards and saying thank you to people for certain things. It's just an example of how relatively small gestures can have a longer lasting impact than you'd think. I've also talked previously about the ways that we can be more present and mindful. So if we savor certain experiences with individuals, with our community, with people at work, if we do acts of kindness, whether it's random acts of kindness, whether it's offering to help someone at work, whether it's buying them a coffee or just going for a walk or even just listening to them. Acts of kindness can be a great way to bring together people, to help people to connect. And it's that connection that draws people away from that sense of loneliness and to a sense of belonging. So we've also looked about learning. Learning new things can also take you out of your routine, that you may feel a little stale. You want to break the cycle of potentially feeling lonely. So by learning something new, joining a new club, finding a new hobby, doing something you enjoy will have that impact of bringing you out of, or people out of, potential spiral, a bit of a funk, to do something differently. And just one last example of doing something new, how I've used that and how I've experienced it. So after COVID, for whatever reasons, I was just not in a great space, slightly out of kilter. And there was an opportunity to have a night swim in a local lake. Twice a year, my wife and I, Shannon and I, ended up going down, doing something completely different, going into the water, chatting, just enjoying the experience, the positive environment with loads of people around, and just breaking the cycle, doing something different. And it was wonderful. It was awesome. And so by challenging our neural pathways, by doing something different, by going to different places, by learning new things, by meeting new people, as small as those things may do, can act as a spark to help you. Well, it certainly helped me, jolted me out of quite a negative space. So doesn't need to be sport, certainly doesn't need to be exercise. Kind of whatever you enjoy and that you can savor and get the most out of. Whatever those micro moments are, ultimately in the workplace or in the community, they can be really small. They, in their essence, help create trust and connection between individuals. They can raise your own morale. It can raise the team's morale. And it also can aid your motivation. If you get that buzz from going for a midnight swim, a supervised midnight swim, I might add, then it may be that you want to do it again. And I guess if we are looking to create changes for that little spark to jolt yourself into an upward spiral in terms of either our own or other people's mental health, just be mindful that ultimately it's got to be something, it doesn't have to be. If you do something you enjoy, you're more likely to stick at it and you're more likely to get that buzz from it. Okay, so I've covered off some of the key areas that I've discussed over the last 4 days for Mental Health Awareness Week and the importance of community. As I said, Mental Health Awareness Week is 1 week in the year where we actively focus on looking after our own mental health and other people's mental health. But let's not stop here. Let's be mindful of the importance of community, the sense of belonging, how loneliness can really have a factor in people's mental health. We need to be there to support each other and ourselves throughout the year. So whether it's through micro moments, whether it's through gifting, savoring, learning new things, just be mindful of the positive impacts that can have on us and the community around us. And as we build that community around us, how we all as individuals become more resilient, more positive, and can support each other and ourselves and maintaining our mental health. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to get in contact. At My Life Tonic, we look to support the health and well-being of individuals and organizations. So I'm sure we can help you and support you in whichever way you need. But in the meantime, hope you found these lunch and learn sessions helpful, and please don't hesitate to get in touch.